Why don't we have rapid at-home tests? So you said there's a bit of confusion. FDA is involved. You continue to talk about that these at-home tests are classified as, I guess, medical devices.
That's right.
And so because of that, FDA is looking at them differently than they probably should be looked at. So what's the problem here? Can you sort of explain what does it mean to be a medical device? Why is that an issue? Where's the FDA messing up?
When we declare something as a medical device and we evaluate it as a medical device, then it makes sense that the comparison, if you're trying to get a new one onto the market, that the comparison would be against a gold standard medical device for that purpose. So PCR is currently the gold standard, or at least in the eyes of the FDA, the PCR test is the gold standard medical device. And as a physician, that's because it's so sensitive. As a physician, I have one patient in front of me at a time. And that patient comes to me, and I don't have to care about the 99.9999% of people in the world who are not in front of me. I only care about that one patient. And so when I get a sample from that patient, and that patient's saying, "Doc, I don't feel well. I haven't been feeling well for the last few weeks. Do you think this is COVID?" Well, for that question, I want to have the absolute best sensitivity test, regardless of what it means for transmissibility, because my patient isn't sitting in my office saying, "Doc, do you think I'm infectious?" They're saying, "Doc, do you think I have recently been or am infected?" And these are totally different things. One is medicine. And if the patient's infected, the time isn't of the essence because they're sitting there in my office. I can say, "Look, I'm sorry you're not feeling well. Let's get a PCR test on you. We'll be able to tell you if you have any evidence that there has been recently an infection inside of you." Mm-hmm. And you'll get the result in a couple days. And it might be expensive, and so insurance is going to pay for it. And you're just one person, and so I don't really care how many resources it takes to get you this answer. On the other hand, there's public health testing, and public health testing it has to account for all of the people you're not seeing as well as the person you're testing at the moment. So accessibility becomes a central theme. Frequency of tests, it has to account for all the days that you're not sitting there in front of your doctor's office getting a test as well as the one you are. So it has to say how frequently. What if you're infected tomorrow, but you were at the doctor's office today getting a negative COVID test? That PCR test at the doctor's office today is going to do nothing to let you know that you get exposed and infected tomorrow. The only way to know that is to be testing yourself frequently. So, and the reason it matters is that these tests can be accessible if we are okay with saying the real purpose of a public health test is to answer the question, am I infectious? The reason we want to answer that is if you're infectious, that's when you isolate. We actually don't want to isolate positive PCR positive individuals who are no longer infectious. That's bad public health practice. Like, if I haven't been infectious for 3 weeks, I don't want to have somebody tell me that I need to go and isolate for 10 days just because I happen to use a PCR test today, 3 weeks after I was infectious. And furthermore, I definitely don't want the public health agency to come and, round up all the people I was with last night and say, you guys have to quarantine for 14 days because you were with Michael, who wasn't infectious yesterday. It's nonsensical to do that.
And it's a huge disincentive to actually get tested.
That's exactly right. Huge disincentive to get tested. People, if it's too sensitive, especially with flights, things like that, like, we shouldn't be stopping people from taking a flight if they haven't been infectious for 60 days. And to be clear, people are only infectious for, somewhere between 3 and 7 days, but can be positive on a PCR test for 30 to 70 days. So, it's potentially a tenfold difference in terms of how long you're PCR positive versus how long you're infectious. So we don't want to be taking people during those 30 to 70 days and saying you need to isolate just because you go and get a swab, or you can't go on your trip just because you had COVID last month. That's not good use of a test. So the reason we don't have these tools right now is because when we evaluate a rapid test as a medical device, the FDA says, well, this has to achieve the properties that we expect from a medical device, which again, doesn't have to take time into account, doesn't really have to take cost or resources or scalability or access into account. It only takes sensitivity and specificity to catch molecules. And so just by definition, I mean, it is a mathematical fact, that if you have a perfect public health test for COVID, which means that it would be 100% sensitive and 100% specific for contagious people or for the infectious stage of an infection, then it literally can't. It is an impossibility for that test to achieve an 80% sensitivity at a population level against a medical device, which is what the FDA asks for. And that's because you're only infectious for maybe 20%. So theoretically, it should only have a 20% sensitivity
Right.
against the PCR while still being a perfect a perfect public health test.
And the test is answering the question, am I infectious? That's what you're testing for, not for the exact counting of the viron particles in your system.
That's exactly right.
Okay.